Born this day to Hugh Kinsman Cudlip.
A son.
Yesterday, they ignored the warnings of the stars and published a new newspaper. Yesterday, the sun was born under the sign of Virgo.
Study the financial situation carefully. Patience is better than taking a risk just now. Do not take on new projects, but get yourself well organized. Make up your mind to take it easy for the day.
The stars looked down on a sun where they had no time for sentiment. For even as they worked to produce a new paper, the remains of the old one, the Daily Herald, Dad's own paper, were being swept up and thrown away. In place of the Herald, they made another newspaper, and they made it in 12 hours.
Sunrise, she bringing the morning.
They planned the paper.
Story, if the election date is announced tonight, which is unlikely, I should think, but if it's announced tonight, he will do a story on how the telephone rang in Wilson's room and he heard the date and so on, what he did after that. Alan, what have you got to diary?
I've got the Tokyo guidebook for the Olympic competitors that I think I can have a little fun with. I mean, nobody could possibly actually pronounce the words. What they have to do is point to it in a book. It's got everything there except lightning has struck my postilion.
They collected the news.
Hello, Michael. Good morning. I hope I didn't waken you too early. What's all this about the Eskimos being radioactive? Really? And they're blaming it on the Russians.
I want to fix up something with the Rolling Stones at their next recording. I want to do a sort of reportage thing.
They chose the pictures.
That's a good one, that's the last, isn't it? That's good, and just the swinging skirt, isn't it? I don't think much of that. It's too bit lost, isn't it?
They looked at fashions.
Oh, yes, it's a marvellous copy. I was just wondering about the length. What do you think? I think it's
length of trousers?
Yes.
How do you feel in them, Jackie?
In Fleet Street tradition, they got on with their expense sheets. They shaped the pages.
There's going to be plenty of white either side, but not too much. At the moment, there's much too much there and there. But this one, which is setting about 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the outside block to there, which will run across to about 8 1/4, like that, good and strong.
How high do these things come here? I'm just finding out. Because it might, in fact, just be a rather nice PS to the column. You know, a very tiny picture with a few words down there from you. Oh, you.
They dotted their I's and crossed their T's.
Anne, Princess Anne looking around the dish.
They put it together in type. And then they printed it all.
On these same presses, only 24 hours before, they were printing the Daily Herald, a paper read by nearly 5 million people a day and losing £500,000 a year. It was Britain's 5th largest daily paper, and yet it failed.
Simply, the Herald withered because half of its readers were too old and too poor. And as its readers gradually died, so the Herald itself died.
The Daily Herald was included in a job lot of money-making publications called Odham's Press, bought 3 years ago for £35 million by Cecil Harmsworth King, publisher of the Daily Mirror. Cecil King had no illusions about the Herald.
It has been the organ of the Labour Party, and particularly of the Trades Union Congress, and has a sort of cloth-capped socialist image, which has ceased to be attractive today. it still attracts a certain number of elderly people who look back with nostalgia on the Keir Hardie era. But in the year 1964, young people have never heard of Keir Hardie.
The Trade Union Congress, part owners of the Herald, wanted to hold on. George Woodcock, the General Secretary, explains why they finally agreed to sell out to King for only £75,000.
There was perhaps an alternative to reduce the size of the newspaper, to concentrate on serving a very limited number of people, perhaps at the most 500,000, thereby reducing our financial loss. It is true. But the question then was, would a newspaper of such a limited circulation be effective for any real purpose? Would it be anything much more than a parish magazine for the faithful?
The faithful few, in fact, only yesterday were still buying 1,265,000 copies of the Daily Herald every day. Cecil King explains why these numbers alone were not enough.
A paper like the Times, with a sale of 250,000 or less, pays its way because it has a circulation among members of the establishment who are supposed to be able to influence business of all kinds in many trades. A paper like the Daily Herald does not get adequate advertising because the sort of people it is read by are not sought after by advertisers.
So 18 months ago, Cecil King and his colleagues decided it was time for a new newspaper. They decided to replace the Daily Herald with another paper that would attract advertisers. First, they looked at the old-fashioned way of classifying readers.
This had always assumed that each social class had a distinct type of paper, and that the lower the class, the less the money they had to spend. But this is no longer true. First, people don't always buy the papers of their class. Top people, for instance, don't always take the Times alone.
Mr. Douglas McClelland, who ran Odham's research, discovered other and more important changes.
They take various forms, but basically they take the form of the mass market in this country being very much better off than they were 10 years ago. Wage earnings, for example, have increased in real wage buying terms by 25%. The result of this is that people, the lives of people, their cultural life, their social life, has changed very markedly over this period of time. They're very much more home conscious than they were because they have the means to buy things for their homes. They have more interest in leisure because more of them have only a 5-day week. They're more interested in education, in cultural pursuits generally. Now, all these people, mostly under 45 years of age, who reflect these social changes, have been given the general title of the growth generations. And it is the growth generations in whom we have special interest. Somewhat uncharitably, I think, they have been called the steak-eating weekenders.
Around the steak-eating weekenders, the new working-class aristocrat, Cecil King decided to fashion a newspaper. He gave this job to the man he describes as
the most experienced, the most mature, and the most brilliant newspaper editor in the world.
Hugh Kinsman Cudlip, one-time editor of the Sunday Pictorial, chairman of Odham's Press, managing director of Mirror Newspapers, and author of a book called Publish and Be Damned. Hugh Cudlip made no secret of the difficulties.
Now, will the paper be as brilliant as we hope? Well, of course it won't. It would be utterly ridiculous to pretend that it will. Sometimes when I look at the bloke who's going to write the brilliant column and see him coming into the Herald office on his crutches, my heart bleeds. But I'm a great believer in injections.
So his first task was to pick his key men. He decided that 56-year-old Sidney Jacobson, the last editor of the Herald, would be the first editor of the Sun. He also picked 38-year-old Roger Wood, a former Daily Express editor, as the new paper's managing editor.
At Cudlip's country house on the banks of the Thames, they met at weekends to plan the newspaper.
Now, this is one, you know, now, I don't know what we all think about this. A lot of people said we should have a sociologist on the staff. Well, it seems to me that on a paper like this. Everybody on the staff is at any rate, an amateur sociologist. I don't see how you can have a chap with a long beard and pince-nez spectacles sitting in the corner saying, let's ask the sociologist. I mean, won't we be in touch with all these people automatically?
Yes.
Do you see anything in that, Sydney?
I see nothing in that at all.
And if a sociologist, why not a midwife and a beautician and a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Why put either one?
Fair enough.
Could you tell us about...
But perhaps his biggest task was as a crusading missionary to win over converts to the Sun. To the advertising agency entrusted with spending £350,000 just to get the newspaper launched, he spoke thus.
Now, we have, at all our editorial conferences, reiterated time and time again the basic facts of our time. Now, one which affects us considerably in our thinking is that whereas before the war, in 1938, 1 in 10 of the married women of this country were working, the figure has leapt alarmingly to 1 in 3. And it's very nice to see such a...
To the newsagents, he spoke thus.
Well, if 1 in 3 married women go out to work, just to go on producing the orthodox woman's page is demonstrably balls. No other word occurs to me. Well, quite clearly, the woman's page needed a new look at. So we've done that in a very big way indeed, and we're not having a woman's page. Who are under 35.
To his journalists, he spoke thus.
On various papers in the group, I mean, I've made, quite frankly, the expensive error of keying in campaigns like this, in keying the thing to a too young generation. And what indeed happens is that these bastards don't buy the paper and you merely repel their parents.
To his printers, he spoke thus.
We're starting a page which I think we can frankly admit was stolen from the Sunday Times. It was that paper which began what is now called reporting in depth. But no daily paper does this. The Daily Mail has tried to do it rather limply in the past few months. But what they publish is rather dully written and written at far too great length. So we're doing a page called Probe, which will be a news page, which I want to warn you will probably be late to press, gentlemen, but we'll do our best.
And to World in Action, he spoke thus.
This year, half of the population of this country, this year, become under the age of 35. People who've never heard of the Duke of Windsor, and if they've heard of him, think that he's an old character in a Gilbert and Sullivan opera.
Clearly, the biggest single influence in shaping the Sun is Hugh Kinsman Cudlipp. So, what manner of a man is this 51-year-old, self-confident Welshman?
He was born in Cardiff, one of 3 brothers who all became Fleet Street editors. As a child, he played in these back streets, and neighbours there still recall the young Hugh.
I mean, there wasn't any messing about when he told his friends to do or take a part. They had to do it without question.
Hugh Cudlipp must have read a terrific amount, although we never saw him reading. He used words which we normally had to go home, frankly, and look up very often in a dictionary to find out what he was talking about.
Well, I think his mother thought he'd go in for something different, solicitor or something like that. But no, he was determined to go on the papers.
Cudlipp was barely 15 when he betook himself to the north of England as a cub reporter for the Manchester Evening Chronicle. He got the job of reporting Salford Town Hall. Another cub reporter there at that time was Monty Grimley, who still reports on Salford Town Hall.
I never visualized his riding to the top of the tree as he has done, but I do remember this about him, that he impressed me with his neatness, with his unassuming and courteous manner. I would like to say this, that Hugh did leave this impression upon me, that he was the kind of person I would very much have liked to have been myself.
4 years later, Cudlipp arrived in Fleet Street. He was then 19. Within 3 years, he joined the Daily Mirror as features editor. On the same day, they hired a bright young advertising man, Mr. William Connor, to write a column.
And the column then started
in August 1935, and it was called Keep It Dark. And then we came to the problem of what it should be signed by, and I thought, I have a good name called William Connor, an Irish name, and I thought I'd see the name hoisted on the masthead. And I said to Hugh, well, you know, by William Connor. He said, no, life's not as simple as that. He said, by Cassandra. I said, who's Cassandra? He said, well, it's got something to do with a Greek goddess or something. I then said to Hugh, now why have I got to be called Cassandra and not Connor? And he said, I'll tell you why. He said, because the powers that be here don't think you're going to do that, and they think that they may have to fire you very shortly. Hugh said, I think it's quite likely too. So we'll fire you, and then we'll carry on with the name of Cassandra with some other successor. So we won't lose the value of the publicity of the name Cassandra, and then when you're gone and finished, we'll still carry on.
After 2 years with the Mirror, Hugh Cudlip, still only 24, became editor of the Sunday Pictorial. One of his top crime reporters was Douglas Worth.
When I was working with him on the Sunday Pictorial, he had me investigating vice, and I found a group of men, real thugs, running pavement girls, you know, with knuckle dusters, knives, the lot. And of course, I wrote about it. Then subsequently, a week or so later, they were arrested, and there was a big court case. Cudlip saw this. He came up to me with the cutting, and he says, look, Doug, this is disgraceful. Here are people with knuckle dusters and knives. And I said, yes, Hugh, I wrote about it a fortnight ago. He says, yes, but it's true.
By now, Hugh Kinsman Cudlip, the half-a-crown-a-week cub reporter from South Wales, was well on his way to becoming the most powerful journalist in Fleet Street.
At one time, indeed, the three Cudlip brothers controlled the editorial content of 4 of Fleet Street's biggest papers. For in 1952, Percy Cudlip, now dead, was editor of the Daily Herald. Reginald Cudlip was editor of the News of the World. And Hugh had become editorial director of the Daily Mirror and its twin sister, the Sunday Pictorial.
TV scriptwriter Keith Waterhouse, once a Mirror leader writer, is among the many journalists who have definite views on Hugh Kinsman Cudlip.
Well, many people think that Hugh Cudlip has got great journalistic courage, and that people admire the courage. This reputation, I think, largely depends on his having exposed the twin perils of VD and automation. He is a romantic. When he espouses some cause, it's not because he thinks this is a good thing to have in the Mirror. It's because he really believes in it himself. He's got this sort of very old-fashioned Welsh lyrical hot gospeling sort of romanticism. He really believes in some kind of New Jerusalem that's across the way somewhere.
I remember a story of Bill Connor's. Bill Connor, Cassandra, that is, his columnist. And Bill was saying to me how important it is, if you want to save your soul in journalism, never to take promotion, never to go up the executive ladder. He says it's stay a reporter, stay a columnist. But going up, it's like climbing Everest. It's nice in the foothills, the shade, the trees. But get up there and you meet the blizzard and the abominable snowman. And I said, yes, Bill, but, you know, there are people who've done it. Hugh Cudlip's done it. Bill said, but he is the abominable snowman.
I don't think that he's a man who believes in sort of long-distance messages. I mean, I think that he's a man who thinks through the blood. And there's a great, terrible German word for this, which is 8 foot long. In other words, you avoid all the logical, reasonable approaches to the solution of a problem, and then you think you know, and quite often you do know, by instinct and not by cold-blooded processes of thought. And I think that that's what Hugh's done, and it's made itself so clear that he knows whether he likes an idea or not. I'm not saying his judgment's right, but it takes him roughly the better part of a thousandth of a second to know whether he likes the idea or not.
The sun rises on a Fleet Street battlefield. The Daily Herald was only the latest casualty. Even the News Chronicle, with a circulation of 1.5 million, couldn't survive, and it was swallowed up 4 years ago by the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail itself, the 3rd largest paper in the country, may well become the principal target for the snipers in the sun. The Mail circulation is already slipping, and today it sells nearly 200,000 less copies a day than it did 3 years ago.
The war between the Sun and the Mail is something of a family matter too, for the Mail belongs to the second Lord Rothermere, who is Cecil King's cousin, and both of them are nephews of Lord Northcliffe, who once owned both the Mail and the Mirror.
The real infighting between the Sun and the rest of Fleet Street will come in the attempt to capture the young affluent readers, the steak-eating weekenders. For these are the people that all the papers want to get at. The latest entry into this field is the Sunday Observer's colour magazine, edited by Michael Davey.
You'll see the popular magazines now, towards the end of the week, starting up magazine-type features aimed, roughly speaking, at people's leisure habits and leisure thoughts. And that lays them open to advertising from motor car people, travel, etc. There's a lot of lush commercial advertising that can be hitched up to this sort of weekend leisure feature.
Many of the advertisers, however, will want to see just how well the Sun does before they begin to support it. In advertising agencies like this, they assess the Sun coldly.
Start publication on the 15th of September, mid-September. Have you considered the Sun for this product? Based on what I know about it and what their aims are, it would seem to me that they're aiming to reach the target audience that we are, that they might be a good vehicle for our advertising. What do you think about them?
We, of course, won't know. We won't be able to sort of say categorically to you whether you should invest in the newspaper long term until we have some, later information on circulation trends after the first 6 months of the newspaper's life and this sort of thing. So,
well, I'd like to suggest really that we postpone a decision on the Sun until our mid-year budget review and decide at that time whether or not to put some money into the Sun. I think
the only sure way of convincing the advertisers is to find new readers. We asked Hugh Cudlip where he was going to find them.
Well, obviously, some of them will come from other newspapers. Some, I think, from the Daily Mirror, maybe some from the Daily Express. And I think that the principal large influx of readership will come from those discontented people who used to read the News Chronicle, the liberals, with a small L. People who find that the Guardian is altruistic, but a little pompous. People who find that the Daily Mail, the paper that a lot of old News Chronicle readers found stuffed through their letterbox, is far too right-wing and unacceptable.
But Lord Thompson, publisher of the Sunday Times, who once wanted to buy the Herald himself, is not so sure that readers' loyalties can be shifted.
I feel that the Sun, to be successful, must take circulation away from other newspapers, and believe me, this is a very, very difficult thing. I think that the habit there, where you've taken a newspaper for many years and you know where to find things and you're interested in certain things in the paper, it's very difficult to change. And I think their possibility of success in this respect is quite limited. Because always remember, they have to get this circulation in time to get advertising before they lose fabulous amounts of money.
Sunrise. As they prepare to spend at least £2 million making a place for the Sun, Cecil King is aware of the odds against them.
A new venture like this is bound to be a gamble. If you were assured of success, the whole excitement would be so much less. We hope that there is a need for a new newspaper. We think that there is. We think that we have catered for it, but we may be wrong.
Lord Thompson has greater doubts.
I admire their courage. I wish them every success. But frankly, I'm glad it's their money they're risking, not mine.
For the Sun, its own stars tomorrow foretell...
Don't be faint-hearted. Bold ideas may pay off in the long run.
For Hugh Kinsman Cudlip, they have to pay off.
The important thing is that this paper does succeed, because if it doesn't succeed, there will certainly not be any new national newspaper in the lifetime of anybody living now.